What's up, Bears fans? This is Super Saiyan Bros TV. This is our very first video. And we are big Bears fans, as you can see, and we want to talk a little Bears football today. So, I'm Tim, and I'm with my son Riker here, who is probably the biggest Bears fan I know, especially for someone his age. So, I wanted to first start with the coaching changes that the Bears have had and bringing in Ryan Poles as our general manager. So the difference this time around, I think, is there is a sense of continuity, which the Bears have not had with any regime since McCaskey became chairman, or even further down the line. We've seen a lot of big fails as far as management and head coaches. Really, since Lovie Smith has been here, coach-wise, those have all been pretty much disasters. Nagy did some good things, but at the same time, he just never could get out of his own way. Just an extremely arrogant coach who believed that his way was going to be successful, and even when it wasn't, he refused to look at himself and say, "Hey, this is what we're doing wrong. This isn't working. Let me listen to the guys that are actually have done this before and they actually know what they're doing." And he never did do that. He refused to listen to anybody else. He was just set in his own ways. And as a result, he is now fired and no longer working for the Bears or anybody, as far as I know. So let's talk about. I want to talk about one thing in particular today. Um, Pretty much everybody knows the Bears have hired Matt Eberflus as the head coach. Ryan Poles is the general manager. Ian Cunningham as his assistant general manager. And they've also brought in a lot of staff outside of that. Alan Williams has been brought over from Indianapolis Colts to be the defensive coordinator. James Rowe, I believe, it may not be, I don't think it's been announced yet, but that's impending that he will take over as the defensive backs coach. Dave Borgonzi is coming over from Indianapolis to be the linebackers coach. Luke Getsy has been brought over from Green Bay to be our offensive coordinator. He's brought over Janoko from, I think that's how you say his name, from Minnesota, who is going to be the quarterbacks coach. And he's brought in Tyke Tolbert from the New York Giants, excuse me. He's been all over the place in his career, coached some really great wide receivers. So he's going to be the wide receivers coach. Just to name some receivers that he has coached: Demarius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. He had Wes Welker at one point, who continued to be fruitful in Denver, which typically players in general that leave New England don't have quite as good of a career elsewhere. Wes Welker picked up right where he left off. Some other names: Lee Evans in Buffalo had the best time of his career while he had Tyke Tolbert as his coach. Some big names there. I believe he was in Arizona for 1 year, and I believe Larry Fitzgerald was there at that time. It may have been his rookie year. I could be wrong. It may have been after, but regardless, Tyke Tolbert has a very, very good track record in the NFL coaching wide receivers. Offensive line coach, they brought in Chris Morgan, who has been an assistant O-line coach for many years. He had one stint as the full-time offensive line coach. But there's one thing I want to bring up about these coaches that the Bears have brought in. They all the offensive coaches, all have ties to the Shanahan offense. And that is significant to me for many reasons. Number one, the Shanahan offense is the perfect fit for the Chicago Bears, especially for Justin Fields, his strengths, and it's going to be fantastic for our running backs, David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert, and if impending if Tariq Cohen comes back this season, which I still haven't figured out why he's been out so long. That's a dig on the training staff and strength coaches that we've had in the past. So hopefully this new staff can bring in some solid trainers and strength coaches. So, but I want to bring this up with the Shanahan offense because a couple of things. Number one, the Shanahan offense, the running game is its strength, and that's because it's an extremely unique running style, which is it's very difficult to learn, especially for offensive linemen, because these linemen have to learn these different schemes to move so the runners can have a clear opening on the outsides, and it's not just a run up the middle, run through, power through. This offense is designed to create space and designed to create plays for these running backs, and it's very difficult, especially like I said, for an offensive lineman because you have to be an athletic offensive lineman. You cannot be a powerful guy that just stands in there and takes the hit. He's great in pass protection, whatnot. You have to be a very athletic down the field offensive lineman because you're going to be moving guys down the field. So this is significant to me. One, because the Bears' offensive line is not very athletic at this juncture. I believe Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum are fairly athletic, but these are guys we just drafted this year. And I don't think, if I had to guess, Jenkins is going to stay on the left side, and I don't think Borum is going to stay on the right. I think there could be some changes there, whether that's moving Borum to the inside or possibly even back to left tackle, because I thought he played excellent at left tackle when he was given that opportunity. I just think Tevin Jenkins is more fit for a right tackle where he played in college. I think he's very good, and he could be very good. Possibly even at left tackle, but I think he just fits better at right tackle. And there are certainly some free agents on the market, and I think we're going to be busy in free agency on the offensive line, especially considering we don't have any first round picks in the draft this year. So, but I wanted to mention that it was very, like I said, it was very difficult for an offensive lineman to learn this scheme, but it's also going to play to our strengths because honestly the best offensive player on the Bears last year certainly was David Montgomery when he was healthy, and this kid just showed huge promise in year three, just huge strides. And the one knack I would say on Montgomery was that he's great on contact. When he has contact on him, he gets a ton of extra yards, but especially in open space, and when he gets an opening or when he shreds a tackle, there's not a whole lot of downfield burst. He doesn't get a whole lot of extra yards. If he sees, it's crazy because if you watch tape from this year, when David Montgomery over years past, there's never any holes for him, and so he's so used to just turning through and running through tacklers. And this year there was a few times where he had significant holes, and you could just see like headlight or like deer in the headlights. He's like, what do I do? Like I have a huge hole to run through, and I think that's going to be huge for him to actually get some space. Because then instead of breaking a tackle in the backfield, you're now breaking a tackle in the secondary, which is huge for him. That's going to be big chunk yards and gains for him. So I think that's going to really, really help David Montgomery out, bringing in this run game. But it also really helps Justin Fields. Um, Justin Fields is never that great under center. It's never been his strength. I wouldn't even say even in the shotgun is really his strength. His best performances and the times where he is at his strength are in the play action. That's just his strength. And for whatever reason, Matt Nagy once again couldn't get out of his own way, and he would um, to he would not coach Fields out of the play action. He's so set on his ways and his offense that just never worked, never clicked. It didn't matter who was calling plays; the offense just didn't work. And a lot of that too is not playing to his players' strengths. And Nagy had a system in place, and he wasn't budging. Like, if you're going to be my quarterback or you're going to be on my offense, you're going to play my offense. You're not. We're not going to play to your strengths, and it hurt him, and it got him fired. So that's one thing I really liked that Poles and Eberflus preached, was that they were going to play to their players' strengths, especially with Justin Fields. Like, play to his strengths, and from there we work on the weaknesses and we exploit those and we target them and we get better in those weaknesses. But that's one thing I really, and I was watching tape a couple of days ago, watching Justin Fields out of play action, and when he was out of play action, man, he made some beautiful throws just in stride. I think these are things Trubisky never did. hitting guys in stride, especially on the deep ball, accurate throws, giving his receivers a chance. And for all that I say against Matt Nagy, and everybody wants to say how it wasn't Trubisky, it was Nagy. Well, that is true. That is very true that Nagy was the problem. But if you watch Trubisky, like the intelligence wasn't there, seeing the field wasn't there, things that Justin Fields excels in my opinion, and it goes back to his college days. You can see that. And Trubisky was never a good passer in the NFL, even on the move, where he was supposedly accurate. It just didn't translate to the NFL game. And it didn't matter who his offensive coordinator was. It didn't matter who his head coach was. Even if the Bears had played to his strengths, they could be a playoff team, but they were never getting to the next level because Trubisky was never going to beat anybody. He may not have cost you games if you played to his strengths, but he wasn't going to win you games either, which is something that the defense did for him. And I think that's something that Justin Fields can do is win you games. Um, so that's one thing I'm really excited about is to see how this offense goes, bringing in this Shanahan offense, because this is exactly, in my opinion, what the Bears needed. And I also wanted to bring up a lot of people after hearing Matt Eberflus's conference, or excuse me, his press conference, they wanted to talk about the coach speak. They didn't like the coach speak. I don't know about anybody else, but before I heard the press conference, when I heard Eberflus was hired, the first thing that came to mind was very vanilla hire. A guy that I think he's a solid coach. He's probably going to do a pretty good job. But is he going to be the guy that takes us to the Super Bowl and the next level and yada, yada, yada? After hearing his press conference, I can see why the Bears and why Ryan Poles were sold on Eberflus. Just well poised. I wanted to get out there and play for him. He has that. You can tell he's just an encouraging coach. He's a guy that I really believe these players are going to buy into and want to play for. And I think that's the biggest part of this because the Bears roster is not a terrible roster. Sure, there's things that need to be cleaned up and some guys that need to be cut. Trevathan and honestly, they probably are going to have to cut ties with Eddie Goldman because of his regression and the money that they owe him and the cap hit that will happen if he stays on board. Especially moving to a 4-3, you don't really need a big-time nose tackle like that, especially when you have Bill All Nichols, who has shown so much promise, and he's a very good player that will be a really, really good D tackle in this league, I believe, in a 4-3. So that's one thing I also want to mention is with this new 4-3 coming in, you see the last few years, especially with the Bears, especially since Fangio's been gone, and I think this developed under Pagano and with Nagy's lack of leadership and discipline for these players. You saw a lot of guys giving up on plays, and you didn't see a lot of hustle to the football and things of that nature. And one player in particular that I think of is Eddie Jackson. You just didn't see. I just didn't see a lot of hustle to football. I saw him several times give up on a play, and that's one thing I think, especially him with this new defense coming in, is really going to help him in his play, because Eddie Jackson has not been the Eddie Jackson that we signed to that huge deal. He just has not been that player, and I think that bringing in this 4-3 defense is really going to help him, especially him, but definitely the entire defense, because the emphasis on the hustle to the football and to really try to create turnovers where we've struggled since Fangio left. And I think that's what the Bears are known for, that mean defense that just forces turnovers and punches you in the mouth. That's what we've been missing. And yes, the Bears defense was solid this year, and it's been good even since Fangio left, especially considering that disaster we had with Chuck Pagano coaching. But this defense has still been very good, and I think that they just need to get back to that nastiness, and not making stupid penalties and being disciplined and just hustling after the football. These are all things that I think are going to be really good for them. I think I'm going to close here, but I just wanted to mention those things, and I really think that there are definitely some doubts from fans and people alike about these coaching hires, but I really think for one, you have to be patient and say, hey, let's see what these guys do. And I honestly think the biggest help will be that Eberflus is not going to call defensive plays, which means he's going to be focused on being the head coach, something that Nagy didn't do. And I think Nagy's hand in everything was, or in the offense and trying to finagle everything was a lot of why we didn't have success in his time. And I think that that's going to be huge with Eberflus. Just worrying about the entirety of the offense. And I think it's really going to help Justin Fields because he can say, hey, look, this is how this defense was called. This is what you did here. And I think I would have called this here. This is how I would have defended you. This is how you could have responded to that. And vice versa. This could go back and forth. But he could, just see the game from the eyes of a defensive coordinator who's actually going to be in the room with you, helping you learn, I think is going to be huge for him. And I think that's another reason I really like this hire is because he's willing to be the captain of the ship. And he's going to create discipline, and he's going to be involved in all facets of the game and not just the defense, not just the offense, which I think that's really going to help out this Bears team. And I think if Nagy may have been involved more with the defense, especially after Nagy was extremely blessed to have had Vic Fangio stay on board. He shouldn't have even had him to begin with because he was brought in with Fox's staff. But the fact that Nagy was able to keep him was huge for him because, especially that first year, like obviously the defense carried them, and Nagy never even had to look at the defense. Vic Fangio had that under his thumb. That guy is one of the greatest defensive coordinators in the history of this game. And I think Nagy was extremely blessed to have had him. And once he was gone, you could see the change. And I mean, Pagano, I don't want to put all the blame on Pagano, but he did not mesh well with this roster, this defense, and he did not coach it well. I mean, look at the lack of production we had, especially in the pass rush, which was supposedly Pagano's strength. We were terrible in the pass rush when he was here. So, and obviously he was fired for a reason. But I think, again, this is going to be huge for Justin Fields, and it's going to be big for the offense to have Matt Eberflus there involved in all facets of the game. We may jump on here again once we find out if we get a special teams coach, which I'm hoping Rich Bisaccia comes on because as far as I understood, if he didn't get the Raiders job, if he didn't keep that, then he was going to be the Bears special teams coordinator. So that would be another huge hire. That'd be big for Eberflus having a former head coach there to help him out a little bit and say, hey, these are in these situations, this is what I could have done or what I should have done, or we did and it worked. I think that'll be huge for him having a head coach in there, something we don't have yet, and I think that would be a huge addition for us. But we're going to sign off. Any closing remarks, Riker, that you want to give to Bears fans?
Have a great day today, and see you next time.
Riker is also a huge Justin Fields fan, and I just want to throw it out there. The last I believe it's the last game of the year where Justin didn't start, and or no, it was I think week 16 or week 15. Justin Fields was hurt, and Riker was asking me, well, where's Justin Fields? Why isn't he playing right now? I'm like, well, he's hurt. And he's like, well, that's nonsense. You need to get him in the game. It's like, well, you just didn't understand. But this kid is a huge Justin Fields fan, and I think he wants to see him succeed more than anybody, and the Bears succeed more than anybody. Do you want to make any comments about the Colts before we sign off here?
Yeah, remember the Bears are a lot better than the Colts.
What do you think about the Colts? What do you always say to people? The Colts what?
Suck.
He does not like the Colts. We live in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is only an hour from Indianapolis, so there's a whole lot of Colts fans here. So we don't like Colts fans. So we're going to sign off, and if we get any other news, we'll be back on for another video. Thanks for listening to us for our first video, and please like and subscribe our page, and tell all your friends.
And hit the bell.
Hit the bell.